gender pronoun she, her, ella. I'm the Director and Principal Consultant of Policing Free Schools Canada. I make part of a national and international movement on these issues with and alongside our partners, including the US, the UK, and South Africa partners. I'm also a Master's of Education graduate from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. Bill 33, the Supporting Children and Students Act, is a proposed sweeping legislation, and contrary to its name, has nothing to do with supporting children and students. Bill 33 is a distraction from the real issue, a chronically underfunded public education by the Ford Conservative government, $6.3 billion since 2018, which in 2018, at that time, was already an underfunded public education system under the Liberals. And this power grab moves us towards the elimination of school boards, closer to the decimation of public education system, its privatization under the guise of school choice, along with the ongoing decimation of our public systems and common goods, including the deterioration of community-based supports. Bill 33 has everything to do with further centralizing provincial government power, threatening our democracy and public education, making it easier to take over school boards, and taking the public out of public education, and expanding police power through legislating police decision-making authority over democratically elected school board officials. Bill 33 standardizes policing as a normalized fundamental feature in our schooling spaces, mandating policing in schools, including police in school programs across the province. Bill 33 is a carceral education policy. Bill 33 is about carceral cultural control. And it is about further funneling money into policing and carceral measures and taking money away from education and the well-being of students, educators, and school communities. The Doug Ford government has already chosen to wastefully pour millions of tax dollars into non-evidence-based and fiscally irresponsible and harmful measures of policing in schools through the Ministry of Solicitor General's Community Safety and Policing Grant, and has been plummeting millions of dollars more into technological surveillance in schooling spaces through the Ministry of Education. Rather than addressing the root causes, including the systemic chronic underfunding of education, alongside addressing social and structural determinants of health and equity, which includes a strong public education system. The Ford government chooses to siphon funds out of our schools and communities. The government knows that they cannot police their way into school safety. They cannot police their way into student safety or student academic achievement, and that the relationship building narrative is an intellectually disingenuous, harmful narrative that has already been debunked, including by Ontario-based Gita Madan and University of Alberta Faculty of Education Professor Alexander Da Costa. The government and education minister is choosing to expand policing in schools across the province, despite the data and research being clear when it comes to the issue of policing in schools. And that is that policing does not make educational spaces safer. Policing does not reduce or prevent manufactured crisis of violence in our educational spaces. Policing has harmful impacts on students, including on student achievement, educational outcomes, and student well-being. Students' learning conditions are workers' working conditions, and the government knows full well that what we need are properly funded, supported, and resourced schools, not policing in schools, not the elimination of public school boards, not privatization. No to Bill 33. Fund our schools, fund our communities.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks for inviting me. My name's Erwin Ellman. I'm the president of Defence for Children International Canada. I was also the child advocate for the province of Ontario from 2008 to 2019. I'm thinking about the promise of our children this first day of school, the promise to our province, the power and potential that they hold. You know what? As a child advocate, and after, I've had the privilege, honor of traveling to every part of our province, every corner, and I had the privilege of sitting in classrooms and schools listening to children in those schools everywhere across our province. And today, this first day of school, I'm thinking of another kind of promise. I'm thinking about Norton, who was just finishing high school, and he had immigrated from Jamaica. He had lived with his grandmom, and he came to reunite with his mother. And he told me about how when he got to high school, he was asked and put into English as a second language because he had an accent. And I'm thinking of him and other newcomers, other racialized black youth who, as Norton said, felt stupid by the actions of the school and how it became something he had to overcome because he knew he wasn't stupid. I'm thinking about the girls in Kingston area who I met in their classroom, and they had produced a book, published a book called The Girls Who. And there were stories about themselves, girls who were struggling with mental health issues, some girls who were LGBTQ2S. And they wrote stories about their experience in the school and how difficult it was to find a place of belonging in that school. And in fact, writing that book where they found their voice, they found belonging. And that all happened through something called the School Success Program, which was around the province, that no longer exists. I'm thinking about girls like them. I'm thinking about the 8-year-old in an elementary school in Wikwemikong. And I was sitting with her in her classroom and her classmates, and I remember her saying to me, Erwin, well, she said, sir, sir, don't worry about me. You have to worry about those 12-year-olds and the teenagers. And she said, because, sir, I have not learned yet that I don't have any hope. I'm thinking about Joe in Thunder Bay with his mom. Joe was in senior kindergarten, or just leaving senior kindergarten. And his mom told me about how Joe was sent home from school for 2 weeks by the principal, suspended. And the reason was because there were no special education resources in that school that could support Joe. I remember the mom saying how Joe cried himself to sleep that Sunday night, because he couldn't go to school the next day, and wondering why, and thinking he did something wrong. And I'm thinking that People for Education report that said 63% of secondary school principals have had to ask and contemplated asking students to stay home from school because there are no special education supports in the school across the province. And 50% of elementary school principals doing the same. Thousands and thousands of children. I'm thinking about Crystal, who told me, Crystal lived with cerebral palsy. And she said, I used to think school was supposed to be a mirror of what society could be. And now I know it's just a mirror of what society is. It's wrong. There's no bigger gap, and I've seen all ministries, there's no bigger gap than all the paper, the regulation, the legislation, the policy, the frameworks, the curriculum guidelines, the rules, the directives, paper that would fill this room 100 times in the Ministry of Education. The gap between that and the lived experience of children in our schools. And remember, they are children. All of this, all of it, makes our schools unsafe. And the government's approach to increasing safety in our schools is in the idea of force, power, and exclusion. It is. That does not make our schools safe. Their strategies are increasing surveillance, policing, audits of systems, takeover of boards, bigger punishments. They all think that brings safety. It does not. Underpinning all these ideas is the government's worry about risk to itself, risk to its ministry, risk to its school boards, liability, who's going to take accountability for things, avoiding that, and of course, money. None of this will make one child safer. None of this will make one teacher safer. None of this will make one school safer. None of this will make one community safer. None of this will make one province safer. And at the same time they do this, use this philosophy in every system that touches the life of a family or a child. Every single one. Whether it's the special needs, health system, needless to say, the province knows 60,000, 70,000 children waiting for autism services. Child welfare, one death of a child connected to child welfare every 2.6 days. Monday, Tuesday, a piece of Wednesday, a child dies. Thursday, Friday, a piece of Saturday, a child dies. Every week, every month, every year, and that number is climbing. That's the results of the government's strategy in the community, similar to the results of the government strategy in schools, and they exacerbate each other. My friends from the elementary school system, which I know we'll hear in a second, they have no services, like the children and families, to draw upon. Our systems, the school system included, are collapsing, if not collapsed. It's not hyperbole, it's a truth. Rather, and I call upon the government to listen to this, rather than a system built in exclusion, can we not imagine a system built in inclusion? Imagine a system not built in risk and liability, but in social determinants of health, or other ways of thinking, in child development, in family support, in public health, in community development, in equity. Pick a framework you want to use and build a system that way. Not the system built in the framework we're using now. Imagine a school system, not built in exclusion, but imagine a school system where every child, every single child, every single student has what they need when they need it in order to thrive. How simple a concept is that? And yet, we're doing things like Bill 33 to increase policing of children in our schools as if they're the problem. Our children need and deserve nothing less than a school where they can have what they need when they need it. Nothing less. We must scrap Bill 33 and start anew. Together, all points of contact with children from every conceivable place, from mental health, from special needs, from, yes, education, have to come together with children, with parents, and build that system that Crystal thought of. A system that gives us what we want society to be. Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you. My name is David Maston, President of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, pronouns he and him. Make no mistake, Bill 33 is not about education reform. It's about authoritarianism disguised as accountability. It's performative and regressive. Instead of addressing growing class sizes, the teacher recruitment and retention crisis, or rising school violence caused by unmet student needs, not the absence of police, the Ford government is imposing unnecessary measures to distract from a 7-year funding gap of roughly $6.35 billion that it created. ETFO has long opposed school resource officer programs. Police in schools disproportionately target Black, Indigenous, and racialized students, creating well-documented fear, over-surveillance, and lasting harm to mental health and learning. The Ontario Human Rights Commission has warned of these harms, yet the Ford government ignored both research and lived experience. Oppressed communities must be at the center of decisions that affect them. Bill 33 fails to take this into account. ETFO will not stand for a government that erases progress on equity while undermining and ignoring the voice of impacted communities. We call on the Ford government to withdraw this legislation and ensure schools are safe, supportive, and inclusive, not patrolled by unnecessary police. The solution is clear: adequate funding, smaller classes, robust mental health supports, more educational assistance, child psychologists, and child and youth workers, and improved and fully funded special education services. That is how we keep schools safe.
Thank you. I want to thank all our speakers here today and everyone who is standing on the podium. This is truly an important day. My name is Kristen Wong-Tam. I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for Toronto Centre, but I'm also a parent, and I just dropped my child off at his public school. And I can't talk about Bill 33 without thinking about the impacts that this bill is going to have on my son's own education. And, you know, I want to say that with respect to the faces of the students that were all lined up to get into their classroom today, it was one of excitement and I think also a little of anxiety, a little bit of fear, but I also worry about what happens once they get in there. And this is the same worry that every parent has across Ontario as they're bringing their kids, the little ones, to school. Mr. Ford's Bill 33 is a shell game. It's not a solution. He wants to distract you from the $6.35 billion that he has placed in the education system, a gap that was created by his own government. This is Mr. Ford's playbook. He has done this before. He creates a crisis and then throws a distraction at Ontarians. And every aspect of Bill 33 is this distraction. It's creating bad choices and leading to more funding cuts. Violent incidents, we know, have gone up in school boards, 77%. But we also know, 77% I should say, since 2018. But we also know that this is largely due to overcrowded classrooms. It's due to the fact that there are not enough education assistants. We need more early education educators, early childhood educators. We need social workers in these schools. We need more counselors. We simply need more supports. So the violence that we see in some schools is because of the mental health crisis. It's because of student needs being unmet. And this is especially so for those students with exceptionalities, with learning disabilities, students who are living with disabilities. They have very little to no support, and they're the ones that need more support. So what do we see Mr. Ford doing? We see him wasting money on bringing cops into classrooms, which we know is not the solution. It's not the solution called by any of the experts who have worked for decades and generations in high-quality public education. We see that Mr. Ford is avoiding responsibility, including the fact that students now receive $1,500 less per year than before he took power. The truth of the matter is that Mr. Ford and his ministers of education, and there have been too many over the 8 years to list in my speaking time, but they've been slowly defunding public schools since they formed government in 2018. If they kept funding in line with the rate of inflation, the truth of the matter is that these school boards would not be in the funding crisis that they are. And 44% of school boards in Ontario are facing deficits. This is not because school boards are not doing their work. It's because the government has been underfunding and defunding public education. The crisis clearly has been created by Mr. Ford and his government. But instead of fixing these funding crises, Mr. Ford blames the trustees. He cuts out the voices of students and parents from our public education system. He doesn't want parents, students, or education workers ringing the alarm bell about his funding cuts, but they have been. And the writing is simply on the wall. The next provincial election is years away, and Mr. Ford has now appointed his hitman, his favorite hitman, Minister Paul Calandra, to the education file. And we know Mr. Calandra's playbook: to defund, then to deny, and then to dismantle. He's done this so many times. And now they're coming right back to the school boards, refusing to address the root problems, which has been at the heart of the education crisis in this province. He wants you to be distracted. He wants you to look away and to look at another problem. But we cannot let him do that. Not for my son's education, not for your child's education. The official opposition NDP, students, teachers, and parents, we are standing together, and we're going to fight like hell to stop Bill 33, a bill that is harmful and not helpful, a bill that distracts and doesn't help. We cannot let Mr. Ford get away with any more cuts. The Toronto District School Board alone is facing a $58 million deficit this year. We're going to have less swimming instructors, less outdoor education, less pools, less resources for students. This cannot happen. We are going to fight this, and we're going to support students, and they're going to lead the charge. And this starts today, on the first day of school, and we will not stop until we get to where we need to go, which is a high-quality, publicly funded public education system. Thank you. This brings us to the end of our formalized speaking remarks of the press conference, and any of the speakers are happy to take your questions.
What do you say to those people who liked the Cops in Schools program? And, for example, they were, involved in like anti-bullying programs and stuff like that. Like, what do you say to those people who did like that, whether they were a parent or student that had a positive experience?
Who is that question to?
I think you. Sorry, what's your name?
Andrea.
Andrea.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. The reality is that what we have been seeing over multiple years is that police are taking people's jobs. And these are jobs that are able to be done by community-based partners. They are jobs that are supposed to be done by child and youth workers, child and youth advocates. And the reality is that police are not needed within educational spaces to do things that are out of their scope. It is actually for educators to be doing that work alongside community-based partners, not police.
And can you explain also the connection you made between the potential of getting rid of school board trustees and this?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we are seeing in multiple spaces, including right here in Ontario. So for instance, in News Talk 1010, Paul Calandra was talking about wanting to have police in schools under the guise of relationship building, which is already a harmful narrative that has been debunked. And what they're looking at is connecting it to their PR marketing campaign, Answer the Call, which is to have police funnel money into policing, increase police hires across the province, and they're looking to utilize schooling and educational spaces as those recruitment grounds. It's not actually about the care and supports for children and students, but rather a distinct agenda that is not helpful for young people.
But as he's saying that he's looking very seriously at getting rid of school board trustees, you see this as similar to this idea of adding police to schools? Sorry, maybe I didn't understand fully.
Yeah, it's definitely connected. What we're seeing in regards to bringing police in schools, they are seeing young people as a violence problem. And the reality is that what we have is a problem is about underfunding our education system. And what Paul Calandra is looking at, and even in News Talk 1010 had mentioned, is that they are stating that this is an outdated governance model. But what's outdated is the funding formula. A student-based funding formula has been outdated for many years, that even the Liberals were told to overhaul and place a needs-based funding formula, not a per-student funding formula.
And I'm not sure if you are a parent, how much do you deal with your trustee, your local trustee, if you are? And if anyone who wasn't one of the speakers can also answer that, if you prefer.
I can answer that.
Yeah, come on. Sure. Go ahead and just state your name first, if you could.
My name is Behan Farhadi. My name is Behan Farhadi. I have 2 children. I'm also I would say like a godparent to another child. And I have been, my trustee has been integral to assuring that their communication channels between schools, when those channels have actually been blocked and have been blocked because of underfunding and have been blocked because I can't access the administration because they are overloaded with responsibilities in neighborhoods that are underfunded. The trustee has been integral to ensuring that there's been communication between the superintendent, the administrators in the school to solve really huge problems that are certainly not within my sort of scope to define, but I have, and that experience has, as a citizen, moved me to engage in the kind of like advocacy that I think we all kind of imagine would be best in a democracy. Yeah.
Like specific example of something you may have reached out to a trustee on?
Oh, sure. Actually, it was about violence in schools. It was a student who was engaged, who was in a school where they couldn't actually have enough folks in the hallway to ensure that students were supervised, and it was because of underfunding. And so when I went to work with the administration about this issue that was impacting a child that I had influence over and was an advocate for, effectively their response was, these are the resources we have and we're doing the best we can. Empathize with that, but that's not a solution to the problem. And sometimes it takes a parent, unfortunately, to place pressure on those democratic pressure points to ensure that a child who has needs, all children have needs, but in particular this child had needs, that those needs are accounted for. I found it effective. I found that we worked in a team, so it wasn't a hostile or adversarial relationship, but it was certainly, I needed to have that democratic touch point for me to feel that as an advocate I had influence over the outcome of a student. I think that's as much detail I can give you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to lean into that question. You know, school board trustees play a very important role. They are elected from the community. They know the streets, they know the neighborhoods, they know the schools. And I think that for a lot of parents, maybe, you know, they don't know who to contact. The school boards are very big and sometimes very intimidating places because it's institutional. But they do know their school board trustee. Whether they had face-to-face contact with them or not, school board trustees I've seen have been on the front lines at the school boards fighting for resources for students. They have been on the front lines, for example, at the TDSB, raising the alarm bell that the schools have been underfunded. They've been fighting the $58 million deficit that Mr. Ford has thrusted upon them. And they've been fighting to keep the swimming pools open. They've been fighting to make sure that the swimming instructors are not fired. They've been fighting to retain the music instructors, and they've been fighting for resources and supports for students with exceptionalities. That's what school board trustees do. And they're responsible to each and every single one of us. And without them, right now, we have entire school populations and families who don't know who to contact at the school board, including Mr. Ford's own appointed supervisor of the TDSB, who has no experience in public education, who used to be a Metrolinx advisor, is now running the largest school board in Ontario. Nobody has a relationship with him. I don't even know if he lives in Toronto. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he lives in Halton region. I don't know. But I know our school board trustee and our school board trustees in Toronto Centre have been on the ground working hard with our communities, holding budget town halls, meeting with parents. I've seen them in the schools, in the recreation centers, one-on-one conversations, and they do that work for $26,000 a year. And they do it because they strongly believe in public education, and they're fighting for not just the students at their schools, but for students right across Ontario. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you for your attendance today. Thank you. And thank you to all our speakers and organizers.